Yeah, well, this is absolutely irrelevant to the U.S. economy. It will have very little or no effect. When people realize that the trade between Mexico uh, and the U.S. or Canada and the U.S. is so lopsided that it represents 30-40% of the economies of Mexico or Canada and 1.5% of that of the US. It is even worse with China. 80% of the gross domestic product of China is related to trade with the US, but only 2% of the GDP of the US is affected. It, it's not going to affect the US economy if a particular brand of Mexican beer is more expensive or not, but it will affect that brewery in Mexico. In any case, as we have seen with Mexico, the very threat of these tariffs, once they take a look at the numbers, forces them to do exactly what the U.S. administration is asking. In the case of Mexico, to patrol the border, to secure the border on their side, to stop assisting flows of immigrants and drug traffickers across the border. It took a 1 hour conversation after the threat of tariffs, or rather, after the tariffs went into effect. Within 24 hours, 1 hour conversation, and now Mexico is sending troops to the border. There is an agreement, and there is a 30-day suspension to see if Mexico actually performs as it promised. Canada is a particular thing. Prime Minister Trudeau is on his way out. He was never the brightest light in the chandelier, and he's still not particularly intelligent. There are things he just cannot grasp. One thing that really made me laugh today was in retaliation to U.S. tariffs, the government of Ontario canceled the $100 million contract with Starlink. Well, that's their problem. It is the rural areas of Ontario that will have no internet service. And $100 million to a company like Starlink is like a tip to a musician in a subway. Yes, I think this is nothing new. European countries have imposed tariffs on the US and vice versa for the past 30 years with clockwork regularity. So whether it is cheese from Wisconsin or wines from the Rhone, they all have suffered tariffs, and there's always been some dispute or another, and eventually it's resolved. Because, frankly, while the farmers of Wisconsin can survive without the pitiful French market for their products, the French winemakers cannot survive without the US as a client. So this has happened before. It's much ado about nothing. And no, the water is not going to get to the neck. No, no. There are definitely other things. President Molino of Panama has already relented and reached an agreement with Secretary Rubio to essentially have Panama leave the Belt and Road Initiative and drop their incipient alliance with China. The problem with Panama is the U.S. has absolutely no interest in having China controlling that important waterway that is vital to American national security. Under the terms of the treaties of 1979 between Carter and Torrijos, Panama has to guarantee that no third power will ever control the canal. President Trump essentially threatened Panama. You either get China out of the canal zone and the ports at the mouth of the canal, or we're going to exercise the clauses under this very treaty and take it back. It took 24 hours for the president of Panama to change from a rather bellicose opposition to canceling their agreements with China and move on. The object was never to take the canal back. It was to get Panama to live up to its obligations in the neutrality agreement. The same thing happens with Greenland. There is one American base ever since World War II. It used to be called Thule until Very recently, they put an indigenous name that nobody can remember up close to the North Pole. The U.S. needs bases there to counter the threat of Russian ships from the Baltic spilling into the into the North Sea and the North Atlantic. Of course, there was going to be tremendous opposition to any move of the sort. So he threatened to essentially buy Greenlanders and turn Greenland into a U.S. territory. It's not going to happen. Nobody wants that to happen. But the American bases will be built there as part of the agreement that gets Trump off of Denmark's head. Canada, let me put minds at ease. Nobody in the U.S. wants to welcome Canada as a state. But Canada has to control its border. We have jihadists of every sort coming in from Canada into New York, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Washington State. The illegal crossings across the border have jumped 600% in 2 years. And either Canada controls the border or we're going to pay our extra border security with the tariffs imposed on Canadian goods. And it's not going to get to that. And Trudeau doesn't have long in power anyway. I'm pretty sure that Poilievre will be more than agreeable to reaching an agreement with Trump on this matter. Thank you for having me. Good night.
Recording stopped.